We're going to talk about all things houseplant care.
Okay.
Right? So where to put the plant,
Okay.
repotting, uppotting,
Sure.
watering, feeding,
Sure.
insects, diseases, and the 3 easiest houseplants for beginners.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Let's do it. Let's
All
go.
right, let's do it. So let's start with where do we put the plant?
Okay. You have to start with what kind of plant it is. So
Okay.
when you purchased it or when it was given to you, hopefully it came with an ID tag
Hopefully.
that has the name. If not, then ask a trusted friend or put a picture on social media or use a Google search. Try to identify what that plant is.
Okay. First and foremost. Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes. You need to know what it is.
Okay.
And then if it does not come with any instructions, then hopefully you can just do some internet searching and see what is recommended. In general, the plants that we use as houseplants are all going to be okay with bright indirect light,
Okay.
which generally means in one of your windows. For instance, these are 2 houseplants, my personal houseplants that I brought from home, and they both sit in a north window. That is my plant window.
It's the plant window. Okay.
Yeah. So it faces north. It does not get any direct sun that
Okay.
way, but it is bright. It is bright indirect light, and that's going to be a thriving light situation
Got it.
for most houseplants. Some can take even more light, and those could go in a south or west facing window. Of course, this all depends on how many trees you may have around your house, but that'll help if you can just get an ID, a name on that plant, and you can look up specifically their requirements to know exactly how much light they can or cannot handle.
So we want to be careful not to put them under vents. You know?
Right. If you've got a ventilation system, if you've got a vent right above that plant, that could be a recipe for that plant drying out very quickly. So ideally, you don't want your houseplant sitting right under a vent.
Good deal. What about pets?
Pets, okay. Pets can love houseplants. A lot of cats love to chew on those tender leaves. Sometimes dogs, with their enthusiastic tails, can
that. Okay.
knock plants right off
All right,
windowsills. So it's a good idea to just keep your houseplants out of your pet's reach for both the safety of the animal and the plant, and to make sure you get to keep enjoying that houseplant. If you do have pets and you're worried about toxicity, then you can look that up online too, because there's so many different kinds of houseplants. Most of them are going to be safe for your animals, but it's a good idea to check just if you're worried.
So let's talk quickly about humidity, because that's usually a question that comes up about houseplants.
Right. So what we know generally as houseplants tolerate our humidity, our indoor humidity, very well.
Okay.
Whatever the humidity that we are comfortable in our homes is what our houseplants are happy with, and that's why they have become houseplants. That's why we continue to use the same plants, is because they thrive in the same temperature and the same humidity that people thrive in.
So let's talk about watering our
Okay.
houseplants. All right. So how do we
Okay.
go about doing that?
Get a lot of questions about that. People worried
So
that
do we.
they're over or under watering.
Yeah.
And it can depend on the plant, but in general, once a week is going to be good for most houseplants in general. That's how often I water mine.
Okay.
And we can go through how to water
yeah.
a houseplant. I'll start with this guy. This is a heartleaf philodendron. This variety is called Brazil. And if you water it once a week, I like to put a drip tray under my plants. Typically with any houseplant, when you water it, you want to water it thoroughly so that the water goes all the way through the pot.
Like it's doing now. Okay.
Yep, and drips out the bottom.
Sure.
And that's how you know it has gone all the way through. So it's hitting all of the roots, it's getting that soil evenly moist,
Okay.
is when you see it coming out the bottom. So you do want to water it thoroughly. And your pot should have drainage holes.
Yes.
So you do want your water to run through it. Otherwise, if it just sits there, that's a recipe for root rot.
Okay.
And with your houseplants, it's okay to let them sit in
Yes, I was
that
gonna ask you
drip
about
tray
that. Yeah, we're about to try
for
watering it. Okay.
maybe 30 minutes to an hour or two. Because while you're letting it sit, that plant will continue to suck up water through the roots into the stems and leaves as much as it needs.
Okay.
But after a couple hours, if there's still water in that drip tray, that means the plant doesn't need it. So I would go ahead and take that drip tray out, pour it down the sink, or recycle it into another houseplant that maybe you haven't watered yet, and then put your plant back in the drip tray without water in it, just to make sure it's not sitting in water.
So let's talk about using fertilizers.
Okay.
All right. So what do you use, or what would you use?
I really like the granular time release fertilizer. That's what works for me and my watering schedule. For example, when I repot or when I get a new plant, or if it doesn't seem to have a lot of fertilizer, I might use about this much for a 6-inch pot or so. I would sprinkle that around the edges. You don't want it right up against the stems because potentially the fertilizer could burn.
Right, right.
So sprinkle around the edges evenly.
Okay.
And then each time you water, a little bit of that fertilizer is going to trickle down into the soil
Right.
and be able to be absorbed by the roots into the plant. And with houseplants, you could renew this every 6 months to a year, just depending on how often you water and how your plant is doing.
Yeah.
If it's the middle of winter, you probably don't need to fertilize your plants. All houseplants are going to slow down a little bit during the winter just because the light is lower and the temperatures are a little cooler. But fertilizing is a good idea in the spring and summer.
Okay.
You can begin to tell when the fertilizer has run out, when these little granules get clear
Yeah,
and
I've seen
easily crushable. So if you notice that they're pale and crushable, then probably all the fertilizer is gone out of the granules and it would be time to reapply.
Okay. But you definitely like the slow released fertilizer.
That's what I prefer to do. It's just simpler for me. You can also use a water soluble fertilizer
Yeah.
that you mix into your watering can and apply
I've
that
seen
way.
it. Okay. So let's talk about repotting
Okay.
and uppotting.
Okay. So often when you get a plant, you may want to put it in a more decorative pot. And that's fair. If you get something and it's in a nursery pot and you want to uppot it, that's going to be a little more attractive than just the nursery pot.
Oh, yeah.
And that's fair enough.
Yeah, you want it to look good, right?
Sure.
Yeah, match the decor.
Sure.
You know? Yeah.
Or you may think that this plant is starting to look a little crowded.
Okay.
And maybe ready to go up a size. And anytime you up pot, you only want to go up one size. You can see this is in a 4-inch plastic pot, and this is a 6-inch terracotta pot. So this is the appropriate, it's one size up from the pot that it's in. And you could go ahead and put this in now just for decorative reasons. But if you want to really check if the plant needs to be up potted, you can check the roots. Since this is a plastic pot, I can give it a little squeeze.
Squeeze it, come out of there.
There we
Look at
go.
that, it's easy
Comes
enough.
right out.
Yeah.
And then you can see the roots.
Yeah. So what do you
And
think about those roots?
So these are nice, healthy roots, but they are not filling up the soil.
You're not.
I see the roots, but they're not packed. Sometimes when you pull this out, the roots will be circling and circling and circling, and that's a good sign that it's time to go up a pot size. But since I can see a few, but they're not thick, I think I'm just going to put this plant back in this size pot and let it grow for probably another 6 months or so.
Good explanation. Okay. Good.
But if, for example, we want to move this pot up just into a more decorative pot, terracotta is going to dry soil out more often than plastic. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, is how much water your plant needs. And if it's a water-heavy plant, you might want to choose a plastic pot or a glazed ceramic pot, just because that's going to hold on to the water longer. This is a snake plant or Sansevieria, which likes to dry out a little bit between watering, so a terracotta pot is a good choice. It does have a drainage hole. I recommend anytime you pot to use a drainage hole.
It's most important. Yeah.
You want that water to run out the bottom. So for repotting, I have some soil here.
Now, is this just a regular soil mix, or?
Yes, this is a regular potting soil mix.
Okay.
So with a pot this size, I'm going to put a little bit of soil in the bottom, and then squeeze a little bit
Squeeze.
to get this pot out.
Ah, look at the roots.
Oh, you can see the root system on that. It's ready to go.
Good
It's
example.
ready to be repotted. It has nice circling roots. It could have stayed in this pot for longer, but it's definitely okay to go up a size.
So
at
is
this
that a
point.
good root system?
Yes, this is a nice healthy root system. Roots do come in different colors.
Yeah, I think that's pretty.
And Sansevierias often have bright yellow, orange roots. It always kind of surprises me every time I pull it out and see the roots.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at the height with the bit of soil that's in there. And that looks a little low.
Okay. So the whole soil level, is very important, right? When
Yes, you don't
repotting.
want to bury a plant when you plant it in general. So you want it to be about the same level that it was in the pot you're going from.
Okay.
So I'm going to add a little more soil and then just look again. That height looks good.
And let me ask you this: so you don't have to break that root ball apart?
No, you could.
You could. Okay.
If it were severely going around, I might.
Okay.
But this looks good.
That's good, okay.
Yeah, it's not overly circling.
Okay.
So I'm just going to leave this root ball alone
All right.
as it is. And generally, when I pot, I want the soil surface to be maybe ½ an inch down from the edge of the pot. And that leaves room to water. If you're potting up to the very top of the pot, then every time you water, the water's going to run over the side, take some soil with it, make a mess in your home.
I think I've done it a couple of times.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, I have.
So if you leave a little bit of room, that leaves room when you water for that water to rise up and then sink down into the soil without overflowing and making a mess in your house.
Oh, Jill, you're teaching me. Okay.
Oh, good,
I got
good.
you. I got you.
So now that we've tested the level and see that's about the height we want it in the pot, we can add more soil around the edges. And I like to jiggle it a little to settle it in.
Yeah.
Also pat it down. I'm not pressing it down. I'm just getting it to settle through the openings. Okay, so we've got our soil added, settled down a bit.
Yeah.
I've patted it just to make sure that it's settled.
All right.
And it is a little below the surface of the pot, which is where I want
What
it.
you want it? Okay. And it doesn't matter that the soil is, just up against, the plant.
No, because this is the same level that it was potted,
Okay.
that it was already potted in.
Gotcha. Good.
So now that it's been planted, I like to go ahead and water it.
Okay.
That settles the soil in around the crevices and also gives those roots a nice little drink to be able to help de-stress any of that stress that may have taken place during the repotting.
All right.
And ideally, we want to water it until we see water running out the bottom. So that's how we know that the water went all the way through the soil. This was kind of dry soil. There it goes.
There it is.
So since it's running out the bottom, we know the water has gone all the way through.
Sure.
So it has moistened all of the soil and gotten to all of the roots. Now it's dripping out the bottom.
Oh, it should be good now. Yeah. Yeah, I think watering is that's the biggest thing when it comes down to your house plants. I think some of us love it too much. Love the
Yes,
plants too much.
yes. Sometimes that is how people kill their plants
Yeah.
with too much love, is a little too much watering. Just want to keep in mind, once a week, a thorough watering,
Yeah.
and then you want that soil to dry out a bit before you water it again. And usually once a week is going to be fine for most plants, especially if they're an appropriate pot size. That can be a problem if your plant is in too large of a pot, because then you have too much soil that's holding onto that water,
Okay.
and it can become too moist of an environment.
So could you do the little finger test to see if it's dry or moist? before
Sure,
you-
if it looks dry on top,
Yeah.
you can stick your finger in down to a couple inches, and if it feels moist there, then your plant is still okay.
Okay. Good deal. That worked.
It did. So it went all the way through. We know it's been watered thoroughly. And right after you pot it, you don't want your plant sitting in water.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and pour this out of the drip tray,
Got it. Okay.
and then your newly planted
There it goes.
newly potted plant is ready to go.
Oh, ready to go. How about that?
Yeah.
That is good.
Oh, I forgot fertilizer.
Yeah. So I was gonna mention the fertilizer.
right.
Yeah, would you? Yeah.
So generally when I up pot a plant, I do like to use this time-release fertilizer, time-release granular fertilizer, just because it's easy for me.
Okay.
And so up potting is a good time to add it. And I'm putting it around the edge of the pot where it's not right up against the stem, because potentially that fertilizer could burn it.
Yeah.
So around the edge of the pot where each time you water, the fertilizer is going to trickle down into the soil and reach the roots.
Okay. Good deal. All right. So let's move into insect issues, disease issues, or anything else that may come about when we're
Okay.
talking about houseplants.
So it's a good idea to keep your Keep an eye on your plants. Generally, when you're watering them once a week is a good time to just visually inspect them and look for signs of insects. Mealybugs are something that houseplants can be prone to. Scale insects, occasionally spider mites. So anytime you see a leaf starting to look, maybe spots have suddenly appeared that didn't used to be there, identify your pest, and then there are ways to deal with it. For instance, if it's mealybugs are those white, squishy looking, looks like little, little walking pieces of cotton.
Yeah. That's a good description. Yeah.
Those can be manually wiped off with a cotton ball or Q-tip dipped in rubbing alcohol, and then keep an eye on the plant. And if they start to come back, take them off again. Same thing with your scale insects. Treat the same way with rubbing alcohol. Spider mites tend to show up on plants that have thin leaves, and if they're in too little humidity, so in too much dryness, dry air, spider mites tend to thrive in that environment. You may need a systemic insecticide at that point. You can also treat the mealies and the scale with a systemic insecticide. But I like to try to manually remove them first, just to not go straight to the chemicals. But a systemic is a good option to really knock out your pest problem if you need to.
Okay, so let's talk about the 3 easiest plants for beginners.
Okay. There certainly are some that are more challenging and some that are easier. So we just repotted this Sansevieria, and this is one of the most foolproof plants for beginners. It's very forgiving. It handles low light well. It also can handle pretty bright light. A common name for this is snake plant, because the leaves do look a bit like a snake. And this is one of your standard Sansevieria types with the green and the silver striping. This is another variety that I like. This one is called Moonshine. So the leaves are more silvery, kind of like the moon shining on a lake. So it's just another color variety. Another real easy one, kind of tried and true and easy, is this heartleaf philodendron. This is the solid green heartleaf philodendron. So you can see each leaf is heart-shaped, so aptly named. And this is the variety called Brazil, and it has this bright lime green coloration, some nice variegation. And they do well in low light, low to medium, bright, indirect light. They will trail with time. They do like a decent amount of water, but it's hard to overwater them. I still recommend once a week. Just get in the habit of once a week for your houseplants.
Gotcha.
So these can turn into beautiful houseplants with time. They're pretty. Just to start out with. Tried and true, for sure.
True, she says. All right.
And then one that I like, this is a begonia.
Yeah, I like that.
This is one of the cane begonias, and I like to recommend cane begonias. Cane refers to the stalk. The stem looks a lot like a bamboo cane.
Yeah, it does.
This particular variety is called Sophie Cecile, and it can end up being 3 to 4 feet tall. And pretty easy care, bright indirect light, medium to high indirect light. Our houseplants can be pretty variable, so they can adjust. It does like bright indirect light, no direct sun, that's going to burn those leaves. And these do come in different varieties. As I said, this one is Sophie Cecile, and this is one that I brought from my house also. So this is another cane begonia. This one is called snow-capped. This variety is called snow-capped.
I can see that. Well, Jill, this is great information.
Well, thank you.
Great information.
Glad to share.
3 easy houseplants for beginners.
That's right. Yes, these are 3 I would recommend.
Well, thank you much.
You're welcome.
Don't give it too much love. Not too much love.
No, wait
It'll
once
be
a
fine.
week. Let it dry out before you water it again.
All right.